Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Joe, and I'm the dad.
And I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
I called the receptionist at my doctor's office, and I said I wanted to make an appointment for my annual checkup. She said, I've got an opening here at 4:45 p.m. I said, why so late? Because the doctor said you're the last person he wants to see. When you picture what it's like to be LGBTQ plus in a small town, what story are you telling yourself in your mind? Because the real story might surprise you.
We are talking today about practical ways that you can support LGBTQ plus people in small towns. Now, this is going to apply also if you yourself are LGBTQ plus, because I'm sure you have people around you that you can also help support. But a lot of these tips, I think, are going to apply directly to yourself. So for someone like me that is transgender, I can use these tips to support myself. And it is because I do live in a small town. I was going to check.
Very small town.
On the way to record here, I was going to actually check to see what the official population is. I think it's like 1304 or something like that.
Yeah, less than 1,500 people.
I always grew up thinking it was about 1,000 people.
Yeah.
I think it's grown a little bit since then, but it's the same town that I grew up in. I remember when I was first considering transitioning and really worried about all of the repercussions, they said there's two places you really want to reconsider if you're considering transitioning. Number one is in your hometown, and number two is in a small town. And I did both.
Right. Yeah.
But I figured, though, one of the nice things that we have is that you are well respected in our community. And I figured
Well, I was till you transitioned.
I knew that it would probably go okay. And
Yes.
in fact, it did go okay. So we're going to be talking a little bit about my story, but then we're also going to talk about some other stories that we've encountered. And it really spans the gamut. And when you're working with a lot of different potentials, I mean, it's just like anything, you know, a small town, there is no one small town. Every small town has their own character, just like every single person is their own person. So every experience is going to be a little different. But one of the things that you know is that people are generally people, and a lot of the things that motivate us as people tends to motivate us on the group level as well. So we can be really great towards one another in a lot of the same ways. And we can be really terrible towards one another in a lot of the same ways as well.
There's an old story about the man was sitting in front of a cafe on the bench in sunning himself. And a guy came by and he said, he says, it's an interesting little town here. He says, have you lived here all your life? He says, yeah, I've lived here all my life. And that stranger says, what are the people like here? And the guy on the bench said, what are the people like where you are from? Oh, he says, they are terrible. He says, they're a bunch of gossips and there's always problems and their people are cheating one another. It's just a terrible place to live. And the man on the bench says, it's the same here. A couple of weeks later, another stranger came along, went through the same thing. I'm thinking about moving around here. He said, what are the people like around here? And, of course, the man on the bench said, what are the people like where you came from? Oh, he says, they were terrific, wonderful people. Easy to make friends there. People cared for one another. They watched out for your kids. It was a wonderful place to be. And the man on the bench said, it's the same here.
Right. That's exactly right. And we just did an episode back on March 9th, not that long ago, looking at a lot of really positive small towns where if you're LGBTQ plus, you might want to consider either visiting or maybe even making that as your community if you're looking for a small town. I also did an episode where we talked about my experience living in a small town, but that was a few years ago now, and we figured this might be a good time to revisit that and talk about some of what I've learned since then, and also to take on board some of the concerns that people have from other parts of the LGBTQ plus community, because while my experience has been a very positive one, not everybody's has.
But when you got 1,200 people in a town, you're going to have a mixture of people. You're going to have some people that just love to gossip. In fact, I once heard of a friend of mine whose wife had just opened a barbershop in her house. And I thought I would give it a try.
Yeah?
So I went over there and got my hair cut. All the while I was sitting in the chair, she gossiped.
Wow.
Continually.
Yep.
I never went back.
Yeah. I thought you were going to tell a joke. You have cried wolf so many times with telling those jokes.
No,
that I figured,
not in this case.
But that is true. And I think we see that in a lot of places. That's a place where you frequently have somebody who's there talking, and they're talking about what they're interested in. And there's always going to be people like that.
They're gossiping.
Sure.
They're gossiping and gossiping. Now, on the other hand, in our family, we rarely said anything, even if it was something we thought you might want to know. Gossip was not part of our family.
And actually, one of the nice things about our small town where I'm living right now, and you have since moved from, but you were there, what was it, 6 years ago that you moved from there?
Yes, I lived there 45 years.
And I think that our community has the advantage or the disadvantage of being really kind of a stoic community, and you don't do those kinds of things in general. Now, there are people, like you said, I mean, that was right in our town, but in general, a lot of the people that we have been friends with just have it as a principle of that's not what you do. That's not how you behave. This is not our values here.
Let me give you a good example of that. In the cafe where everybody hung out, we had a coffee group that got together every morning at 9:00. Men in town. The men in town got together, and we had the back table. There were usually 10 or 12 of us. We'd get back there, and we would have coffee, and we would visit.
10 or 12 in a town of about 1,000 people. You were 1% of the population.
That's true. And we would sit back there, and what was the conversation about? It was about the football game the night before, or it was about our local basketball team and what they're doing, or about the amount of snow we had, that kind of thing. I don't ever remember us sitting down and talking about other people. And that's really true.
Right.
And I was part of that coffee group for, maybe 20 years.
I think there can be a perception, particularly if you live in a city, that small towns are going to be really hodunk and really hick and really gossipy in every level and lots of things that don't really hold true.
I'll tell you why they don't hold true. Because in reality, that's what people think. But the reality is there is no hodunk anymore. Communication has changed that. And in fact, in a small town, there are not enough people to do the things you have to do. So when you're in high school, for example, they need people to go out for some of the sports. They need people to be part of the community theater that they're doing. They need people to be part of the band. They need people to be part of the chorus. All of those things get together. On a citywide basis, it's the same thing. You want to have a city band, you're going to need people. Mm-hmm. Those same people are going to be part of something else. So you interact with people in many ways, not just one way. It's not just, I know you because I see you sitting in the same spot at the basketball game because your son plays and my son plays.
Right. One of my favorite shows is Gilmore Girls that aired in the early 2000s, and they were in a small town in, I think it was Connecticut, and you saw very similar dynamics. Now they were playing it up, of course, but Kirk was in every single scene. He was always there as the comic relief person that was always doing some goofy thing. no matter where they were or what they were doing, he would come around. And all of the various characters that you had there, that's what a small town is. They were hamming it up, of course, but you always get your characters, and you get a lot of people that are just good people. I remember watching a YouTube video a few years ago where this woman was going through and identifying, she was clearly from a city, and trying to see if she could do all of the states. And she considers herself a very well-read person, and she kind of knew what was going on. She would comment on politics all the time, and she tried to figure out, could she get all of the states? And she missed like 15 states. She couldn't tell which one was South Dakota and which one was North Dakota. She couldn't tell which one was, because those were not places that she really knew much about. And I watched that and I thought, that is so telling that how people view small towns is so often of like, well, you don't even count in my world.
I had gone to a place in Iowa. This woman was from New York City. We were both in Iowa, and we were traveling around this town, and they were showing us a variety of things. But we were out there for business. She said, "Oh, look at that. There's a limousine there. I can't believe I would see a limousine way out here." "Oh," I said, "I'm not surprised to see that at all. But then I've traveled before."
And I don't normally hear you say kind of snarky things like that, but it was one of those things where somebody had a real attitude towards small towns.
Oh, she did.
And that is the thing that I want to come against. There are good people and there are negative people everywhere, whether it's a big city or whether it's a small town. Now, Susan Stryker, in her book, Transgender History, which we have talked about actually just recently when we talked about cross-dressing laws, we looked at her a lot. But she said that cities were historically necessary for LGBTQ plus identity because small towns were defined as intimate and interlocking forms of familial and religious surveillance. That was her exact words from the book. So she was arguing that modern gay and lesbian communities just weren't really possible until the mid-1800s when you had cities forming, because then you had places where if you were gay or lesbian, you could leave your family constraints and go out and be among your people. And that I do understand.
Yes.
I think it can be hard to understand that if you have never experienced what it's like to feel like an outsider just for the way that you were wired when you were born. And so there is certainly an aspect where a lot of us that are LGBTQ gravitate towards cities because there we can find people that are like us. So what do you do if you're in a situation like I am, where I am living in a small town because my kids are there? Now, I enjoy living in that small town, but there are trade-offs that go beyond just what the trade-offs would be for somebody else that is cisgender and straight and can fit in easily. For me, for instance, I have a hard time finding people that I feel are really like me. I have some people that are close enough to me. I have some friends from high school, and I have some other friends that I will get together with from time to time. But I always feel like they're not exactly my people like I would get if I was in a bigger city where I could find other transgender people. And we could actually sit down and say, oh, yeah, I went through this and I went through that. There are some support groups I can go to. The last one that I went to, I had to drive 25, 30 miles to get to a support group to be where I needed to be among people that were like me. I do miss out on that. I notice that because I live in a small town, but that's a trade-off that I have made, and I'm willing to do that because my kids are important to me and I want to be there where they are. That would be one of the things with a small town.
Well, let me tell you something I find that surprises me a lot. If you are not from a small town and you come to a small town, you're going to find some surprises that you didn't expect. I'm going to talk about going the other way. We live in the Midwest. where there's a lot of small towns, and in the Midwest, people generally have a pretty welcoming personality. We winter in a very large city. In fact, down south, one of the capitals of the state. And while we winter there, I will tell you, I have seen and heard more hate in those areas than I would have expected to ever hear in a small town in the Midwest. It just surprises me. There's a lot of, I guess they'd call good old boys, and they are really not at all concerned about voicing their opinion on things. It surprises me. Now, there are other parts of the city, of course, that have both types, just like the people in what's this town like. It's like where you came from. But you've got to find your group.
And I think no matter where you are, you can be a voice of positivity in that group. So whether you are in a city or whether you are in a small town, especially if you're in a small town, you have a lot of leverage to be able to change people's minds.
Credibility.
Yes, credibility. To change people's minds. And so if you come with a positive attitude and you say, I'm not going to be somebody that's making fun of people, that's putting people down for being different than me, you can be a bright light shining in that area. And especially when you're among people that are putting down LGBTQ people, if you speak up and say, this is not right, and this is important to me. But I have been in LGBTQ plus communities where they're putting down people that are outside of the community. Now, it is a little different there because anytime you're a marginalized group and you're getting together, there's also some aspect of, yeah, but we've all been, jostled around in the bigger culture in a way that the bigger culture has not been jostled around by us. So there's a sense of like camaraderie, but it can spill over to the place of actually hatred. And anytime we're in any group that is saying we hate people, that deserves to be called out. I don't want to be a part of that no matter who it is. I don't ever want to be somebody that says somebody else, by virtue of being somebody else who is different than me, is not worthy of my respect or of my love. Whether they are on the other side of the globe, whether they're on the other side of the country, whether they're on the other side of my state, or whether they're on the other side of my small town. I want to be that person that is loving towards all of those people in the best way that I know how to.
But let's talk about some things that are definitely a drawback to being in a small town. One of those is the lack, possibly, of a welcoming church. You're in a small town, you may have one or two choices, and they may not be LGBTQ plus affirming.
Right? I have visited, in our town, I think there are 4, maybe 5 churches, and I know that there's at least 1 or 2 that I have visited, and they didn't know that I'm transgender.
Yeah.
They're not people that knew me growing up, and they were not people that I told. And I went and I visited just because I wanted to see what is this church like. And I knew this is not a church that I can be a part of long term. It was fine to visit, and it was nice to experience what they were going through. But that was never going to be a place that I would fit in.
Right. Yeah.
Now, other churches, I think I would be more at home in. It just depends on the specific one.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe finding a doctor who works with transgender people may be a little more difficult in a small town. Well, you may have to drive away.
I'm going to say it depends on where you are. Now, just like anything, finding a provider that you work well with is always an important thing, no matter where you are. But for me, I have always had a good time, probably because I don't push all that hard. So I just come in and I assume that the provider will be accepting of me, And the provider always is accepting of me for the places that I have gone. And I have probably switched my primary care provider 3 or 4 times since I transitioned based on either where I was living or a move, or one doctor left practice and then I was driving a ways and I decided I wanted to go a little closer. Right now I see the nurse practitioner right in my hometown. She is literally 3 blocks away from me and is great. She
That's
prescribes
wonderful.
my hormones.
Mm-hmm.
She watches my hormone levels. She does everything when I'm having an issue or a problem. She looks up the literature for me to see. She always checks to see what are the transgender statistics so that she's not measuring me against cisgender men or cisgender women, but she looks to see where should I be falling, and she has been great. I think one of the big issues that we can have as people in the LGBTQ plus community is we can feel so hurt by the people around us that then we approach them assuming that they're going to hurt us again. And then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, yeah.
We almost put that out and you're not going to hurt me, are you? And then they think, why? Was I supposed to? And then, and then, it becomes sort of, if you approach people in an attitude of, well, you're not really going to like me, are you? Well, then it makes them easier for them not to like you. But if you approach and you just assume, well, everything is going to be fine, it's going to be much more likely to be fine. Now, I don't want to put the impetus for LGBTQ plus acceptance entirely on us or even primarily on us. This is an episode about practical ways that we as allies can support LGBTQ plus people. But one of the ways that you can do that support is by helping your LGBTQ plus person to say, hey, I'm going to go with you. If you're worried about going to the doctor, or if you're worried about going somewhere, I'm going to go there with you. I'm going to stand with you. I'm going to make sure that you are accepted, and I'm going to make sure that you feel good in that place. That can go so far. And I will tell you, that person, that loved one that has you there with them is going to really appreciate your presence.
I'm going to try something like that. I think I'll start by asking one of my friends who I want to be closer with if he wants to come over and shovel my driveway.
We're going to talk about some more ways that you can get people to shovel your driveway right after this. Maybe not.
I'm Monica Scarbin. I love listening to the Transcendent podcasts. I've been listening to these podcasts for over 2 years now and have found them to be not only inspirational, but very informative and emotionally lifting to my spirits, especially when I'm not feeling very hot. I'm a supporter, and I'm glad to be a supporter. Please go to transcendent.com, click on support. By as little as $3 a month, you can cancel at any time.
Let's talk about what's actually good about a small town.
I think one of the big things is that in a small town, you have a lot less alienation because you actually know people. In a big city, you've got so many more people, so it feels like you should know a whole lot more people. But the reality is, you never get to know very many people at all because there's so many people. But in a small town, when that acceptance actually exists, it's personal.
It really is. I can remember when you and your sister were small, very small, and you were outside playing, the neighbors watched for you.
Yeah.
And if there was a concern, which there was one time, where Melanie decided she was going to, on her Hot Wheels, show her friend that she played with where her dentist was.
Yeah.
And so she rode that Hot Wheels about 3 blocks away, and we got a call from one of the neighbors saying, did you know that your daughter, at the time she must have been 4?
Sure, yeah. I'm thinking I like to go for walks in the town, down.
Yeah.
I will walk down the street, and I'm thinking, Yeah, I know, of course, my next door neighbors. I know the people in the corner. I know the people across the way. I knew the people that were right next to the church, right next to, which is almost kitty corner from me.
Yes.
Though they moved away. She used to babysit for me when I was young.
That's
They
right.
moved away. I met the new people that moved in there. I know the people that live right across the way. I know the people that live 2 doors down. And right down the street, I can tell you who lives in all these different places. Not every house, but many of the houses.
Of course.
And so when they know me, that acceptance is real. My next door neighbor, I know their dog is Crouton. And Crouton is very cute dog.
Oh, that's cool.
And so you know them by name. You know their kids. You know their dogs. That's different from the anonymous tolerance of a city.
You knew your next door neighbor when he was a high school basketball star.
Oh, yeah, he was. There's also a lot more opportunity to change hearts up close. This is not about doing LGBTQ plus activism. This is just being yourself. So I know, like, at least one of my neighbors knows that I'm trans. And so then, and they said right away to me, that doesn't bother me at all. And I'm just their normal next door neighbor who happens to be transgender.
It reminds
Maybe
me,
I'm not so normal.
that reminds me of the guy that did some work for you for your cabinets or something.
Yeah.
Before he came over to see you, I told him that you were transgender. And he said, doesn't make any difference to me. Let me ask, if she cuts her arm and it bleeds, what color is the blood?
Uh-huh.
And I said, periwinkle.
Nice. In a small town, resilience and self-definition get forged a lot differently when you can't just disappear into a crowd.
Right.
And you find a lot more surprising allies. You find a coworker that you never thought would be supportive. You find a neighbor. You find a person that you'd think would be the most anti-LGBTQ plus person. And you'd think that because of stereotypes. But you
Yes.
discover you have a lot more allies than you ever expected. People are a lot more open.
Well, let's talk about some practical strategies.
We're talking specifically about for people, if you are like me, if you see yourself as a part of the LGBTQ plus community and you're living in a small town, what are some resources that you can do?
Well, there's the Trevor Project, there's PFLAG, and there's other online support groups. And I mean, these are not substitute for the community, but they are real support groups and real organizations that can help you in ways if you're running into something and don't have the connections that you think you ought to be having, or you're feeling a little uncomfortable. Start there. Start with the PFLAG group.
In my area, as long as I'm willing to drive between 30 and 60 minutes, I can generally find some in-person support groups if I needed that.
Oh, you sure can.
But you may be in an area where that is not so easy. And so one of the lifelines that you reach out to is things like this podcast. But there are all kinds of online resources that you can go to. We are in a different day and age where you can find your people, you can find your community online.
You don't have to expect that you're going to find a group of 10 or 15 people. 1 or 2 people that are part of your own local community. And there are plenty out there, believe me.
And this doesn't have to be somebody that is LGBTQ plus themselves, although that certainly can be. It doesn't even have to be somebody that you're even talking to about that. I have a friend that I have reconnected with from high school, a good friend, but we hadn't seen each other for quite a while. And actually now he listens to many of our podcasts. And we will talk from time to time about issues that for me that I've gone through as I have come out and as I've transitioned. And so those are always interesting conversations, but it is by no means the primary or even a major part of our friendship at all.
Of course.
But it's something that's there if it comes up that we know that we can talk about it. He knows he can come and ask me things or talk to me about things. And I know I've got somebody local that I can lean on if I need something.
That's a good friend. That's the kind of friends you want. It's wonderful.
But it goes the other way too. Sometimes you need to set boundaries. And so maybe you're in a work environment or you have friends and you're worried that sometimes they cross lines. And the reality is that LGBTQ plus people are constantly dealing with things where those around us don't understand and they don't realize they say something that they mean things well, but they use the wrong pronoun. They call me he when they don't realize they just mean, well, I recognize you're transgender and I recognize that there are things that are different about you, and they don't realize how devastating that is to me in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, there's a big difference between somebody doing that on purpose and somebody who really doesn't know any different. I remember meeting my 4th grade teacher. This was 2 or 3 years ago.
I remember you telling that story.
And she was very supportive. And in the midst of our conversation, she got like 3 things wrong about how you treat transgender people. Not because she was trying, she just didn't know any different. And so there are times where if I was going to be seeing her and interacting with her more frequently, I would need to set some boundaries and have some conversations with her and say, hey, can we talk about a couple things? I just want you to know that we don't use my name from how you called me beforehand. That's not something that feels good, or those kinds of things that are real obvious to anybody that knows transgender people, but are not obvious to somebody that doesn't.
Another thing we can talk about is even occasional exposure to a city where visible LGBTQ plus community can kind of recharge you. And you see how things are in another area because there isn't much in a small town for you to compare. And it is very helpful to do that, and it kind of recharges your batteries.
I love June because there's pride celebrations all over, and I can go somewhere and feel like, wow, these are my people. That is always a really good time, whether I'm driving an hour or a couple hours, or I think I've gone as far as maybe 4 hours to one of the major cities' pride events, which has always been a really, really good time. That feels very affirming to me. And lots of times where I've just gone, maybe I've gone to the queer community space where they might have some activities there. I've gone down, a friend of mine hosts what's it called? It's like a scouting event for queer people, LGBTQ plus people, sort of like an adult scouts. You maybe missed out on your Boy Scouts or your Girl Scouts. So they said, I'm going to do something like that, but for adults. And I went down and was a part of that. Had a great time.
How did your Pinewood Derby car do?
I should talk to them about doing Pinewood Derby. That would be a lot of fun. But another thing I do in that same area, I have my therapist. And we talked about that a few weeks ago as well.
Yes.
About how to find a therapist. That is telehealth. I am not going to find the therapist that I really need to be seeing locally. So I found somebody that I just do a web or Zoom meeting and that's all done. And that works great. Now, what can you do if you're an ally? What are some tips that you can do to help your LGBTQ plus friend to feel more safe and to feel more at home in their small town? Well, one thing that is really important is to make sure that your support is visible.
Exactly.
Wear your rainbow pin or your "you are safe with me" with your rainbow thing on it, or maybe the transgender flag, "I'm an ally," something like that.
Yes. And speak up. If you hear something that is clearly wrong, clearly hateful, or something like that, don't be afraid to say something about it. I did that just recently. I was playing a game with some of my friends down south, and somebody made a comment that I thought was completely unacceptable, and I didn't say anything at the time. But when it was just the two of us together, I made a comment. I said, "I'm really surprised to hear you say that. I was surprised that you would even think that. I think that's unacceptable." And, "Oh, yeah. Well, I was just joking." I didn't laugh.
Yeah. And, it didn't have to be a big deal with that,
Right.
but I bet your comment impacted him.
Oh, I know it did.
Yeah. And so that's good. Those small acts carry a lot of weight. And just things like using the correct pronouns or changing if it's somebody that you grew up knowing with another set of pronouns and doing a little bit of practicing. If you are struggling to get somebody's pronouns and you're saying, I'm trying so hard, but I keep messing up, I'll tell you one thing that can really help is just use it in a sentence 5 times. Maybe you have a child that used to be you thought was a son or a daughter, but now they're using they, them pronouns. And you think, oh, I keep screwing up and I keep saying he or I keep saying she. One way you can get past that is to say, okay, they are using they, them pronouns now. And the last time they came over, they had dinner with us. Okay, there was one sentence. Do that for 5 or 10 sentences. By the end of that 5th or 10th sentence, you're going to be much more comfortable how to actually use they, them pronouns. And that took you a minute worth of work, maybe 2 minutes. And that will go so far towards telling your LGBTQ plus loved one that you really care about them because you took the time to practice.
So I'm in the restaurant in a small town, and I'm talking to friends, and they use their own pronoun when they're asking about you. What's my response?
Well, you can be as, I would say, not try to call attention to it, but you can just say, oh, it's she.
That's how I do it.
Yeah, that's perfect. The same as you would anything else. Really the same as if somebody misgendered your dog, right?
And I did that with Melanie a lot.
Yeah.
I really did.
Yeah. It can be, you get it in your mind, the gender.
The other dog was one gender, and now this one is a completely
right. And so you mix it up, and what do they do? It's he.
Yeah.
It's he, or it's she. Yeah. And it just takes a little bit of time, and then you eventually get it. So, yes, it can take some time to get it, but if you are the one that needs to get it, put the work in to get it. And if somebody else is getting it wrong, just drop a simple correction. Doesn't need to be a big thing. Be the person who makes it safer for someone to stay. Showing up, being willing to say something is such a huge thing.
And another thing you can be is a great listener, which is such a huge thing for us. We love to have you coming back time and time again. I notice many of you are going back, especially the new listeners, are going back and listening to many of our previous podcasts. And I am enjoying that. That's why they're there. You can go all the way back to 2022. Every one of our podcasts is available. So if you haven't gone back and listened to some of the topics that you find especially interesting to you, I encourage you to do that.
And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. Our e-newsletter is called The Dispatch. You can go to dispatch.transcendent.com to get that email, or just click the link in the description.
And it's free.
And with that,
we'll see you Monday.
The guy says, "Doctor, I think I'm losing my memory." The doctor says, "When did this start?" The patient says, "When did what start?"